Good afternoon, and welcome to this session on the electronic deposit of dissertations. I'm Carlos Alonso, the current Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and I was asked to preface the proceedings, and I gladly agreed to do so because this is a project that is very dear to my heart and one that I think is a harbinger of many other such opportunities in the future. The contemporary American university has been built on two contradictory conceits. On the one hand, the university is a place rhetorically and conceptually outside society where pragmatism and instrumentality are not invoked as criteria of valorization. This is why universities typically have been built away from the city, in isolation from the urban and its hustle and bustle. And you just have to remember Columbia's history moving upward in Manhattan to flee the city, which is, by the way, also a very American understanding of the university. In Europe, universities tend to be anchored very clearly in the urban, mostly because of a historical difference in the foundations of universities, of course. On the other hand, the university prepares citizens for participating in society and is therefore one of the most important and efficient social agents. It is also perhaps a primary context for social advancement, as well as one of the principal producers of invention and innovation to transform the world we inhabit. These two roles and expectations of the university have struggled with one another continually. Hence, it should not come as a surprise that when current technology makes it possible for us to freely share the product of our work with not just our colleagues within the university, but with society at large, we find elements within and outside the university who balk at the possibility or who view it with suspicion. My sense is, though, that we're decidedly moving toward the totally free and open availability of academic production, which is the reason why the graduate school has, just as our peers have as well, embraced the open access protocol and have begun to require that students deposit their dissertations electronically and to have that work reside in a repository where it will be accessible to all who wish to consult it. But I also believe that this transformation within academia will in fact pave the way for equally free and open availability of all creative work outside the academy, something that, as you may imagine, will require a radically new understanding of authorship, property rights, copyright, etc., whose contours we're just beginning to see currently. With that, I leave you with Kenneth Cruz, Director of Columbia's Copyright Advisory Office, and the Manager of Columbia's Academic Commons, Robert Hilliker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Alonso. So I just want to start with a quick introduction in case folks are not familiar with Academic Commons, explaining a little bit about what Academic Commons is. As Dean Alonso mentioned, it's the digital research repository. It's for Columbia University, but also for its affiliate institutions, so Barnard, Union Theological Seminary, Teachers College, and so on. And what we do is we take the digital scholarship that's produced here at Columbia and its affiliates, and we archive that content so that it will be available in the future. We follow best practices for digital preservation, and we also follow best practices in terms of things like search engine optimization to make sure that that content is available and accessible in the present. At the moment, we're approaching 5,000 items in the collection. We really have a wide range of content. You know, we started out with mostly articles and working papers and things of that more conventional scholarly nature, but we've been branching out as scholarship itself has been branching out into new media. So now we have presentation slides, video data sets, and of course now we have the dissertations starting this past February. To date, we have roughly 300 dissertations that have come in through the GSAS dissertation submission process. And obviously that's a large portion, of our growing content. So we're very proud and glad to have it there. At the current juncture, we get between 6,000 and 8,000 visitors to our website each month. So that's a lot of people coming and looking at Columbia content. And for the dissertations, in many cases that means that they have a much wider audience than they would otherwise have had in the traditional print format. I did a PhD myself, and I'm sure it's sitting dusting on a shelf somewhere, and maybe one or two people have looked at it. But the dissertations that are in the digital repository, many of them have been seen by hundreds of people and downloaded and read. And some of them are, cited in blogs or in newspaper articles, and it drives up, interest and traffic. Their work, their scholarship is out there participating in a larger universe, of content, and that's a wonderful thing. So quickly, just to give you a glimpse, right? This is the front page of Academic Commons. One thing that I really like about Academic Commons too is that it's a multilingual place. So we're really aimed at providing an internationally accessible, international access to the research and scholarship that go on at Columbia. So you can see there, some of our recent content. You can also get a glimpse there. We recently moved to a new platform for our website. And those numbers there show the quarter before we switched and the quarter after we switched. And you can see, so we're rapidly increasing in terms of the traffic that's coming to our website, which is, a big plus. And we're always working to improve that and to find new ways to, increase the excitement around Academic Commons and bring in a new audience. But really why we're here today is to talk about the submission, the electronic submission of theses and dissertations. So what does it mean to submit electronically? Well, the first thing is that, it costs less because the processing is much simpler. You don't have to go out and buy some fancy paper and worry about, printing properly and are my margins all right and everything like that. It also means that you use the UMI ETD portal to upload your dissertation. And so there's a lot of information on the GSAS dissertation submission gateway. And if you, if you've got your smartphones, you can just scan that QR code and go directly to the site. But the web address is also there. And really, one thing I want to point out here is it's been a great thing for us at Academic Commons to partner with GSAS on this. And so, they are the ones who have the information on their website. Salvo Candela's here. He's someone you can direct questions to about this process, but we are also here working in partnership with them, right, to figure out the issues that arise, the little bumps that come along the road. And on that point, I want to start people thinking before they submit or even when they're just starting to write, what are the implications of having your work in Academic Commons? Because now, right, even with previously where your dissertations were available through UMI, in a sense they were published. They were available publicly. Somebody could go and buy a copy in PDF or in print of your dissertation. So they were out there. But they were not out there in quite the same way they are now when they can be accessed, by anybody on the web. So a big piece of that is, yes, you'll have a bigger audience for your work, and that's a great thing. Another thing, though, is that you need to think about what I'm calling the 3 Ps and also the C. And the 3 Ps are privacy, about publication, and about patent law. And so in terms of privacy, and I put there including your own, and this is an important point, you need to think when you're writing your dissertation, am I revealing anything about the subjects of my research? Am I revealing something about myself that I wouldn't want out in the public domain where anybody can see it? And just to give you a really extreme example that came up out of the last batch of dissertations that were submitted, we had a student who wrote her dissertation on Zimbabwe. And in the dissertation, she was critical of the Mugabe regime. And then she moved back to Zimbabwe. And so her dissertation was available for anybody to find. And so she had to, get in touch with us once she realized, because she, hadn't maybe paid attention to the mailings that came out or what have you, and so didn't quite process that my dissertation is going to be out there on the web. So she came to us, and we very quickly pulled her dissertation down off the web, made sure that any cached copies from Google or wherever else were no longer available, and very quickly, got it out of that visible public space in order to try and make sure that, there was no danger for her in having it out there. And so, this is an extreme case, but I think it sort of brings home that realization of, hey, I need to think about what it is that I'm putting out there. The other question is publication. Now, in my experience, it's not very common for people to turn around right after they graduate and want to publish their dissertation immediately. But if you're in a discipline where that is what you do, then it is possible to get a limited term embargo for your dissertation, whether you're just making a chapter available as an article or whether you're turning around the entire dissertation. If it's the kind of thing where you take longer, the reality is you're probably reworking your dissertation radically. It's not, the publishers are not going to see it as the same thing as your dissertation, so they're not going to be bothered by it being out there. But you do need to think about this, right? Because you need to make that decision when you're submitting. Do I want to have an embargo? Do I want 1 year? Do I want 2? The other piece related to that is patent law. And if you make your dissertation available in Academic Commons or really anywhere, if you publish your work, there's a patent clock that starts ticking once you publish that work of how long you have to file for your patent. So, you need to think about that. And if you don't have time while you're writing your dissertation to be doing that, then you should be looking to have an embargo so that you can take that time to make sure that you have, your filing in place for your patent. And then the final thing that you need to think about is copyright law, but that's a whole different talk. Kenny's going to talk to you about that. But before I pass off to him, I also want to point out Academic Commons is also available for your other scholarly work, not just your dissertations. And it's also there for materials that don't fit in your dissertation, right? Because your dissertation is going to be a PDF. But if you have video, if you have, images or data sets that don't fit in your dissertation that you want to make available, you can deposit them in Academic Commons separately. We will register a permanent URL then that you can cite in your dissertation. And this is something that came up last year and we did for a handful of graduates for their dissertations. But I encourage you to think about that. And not just things associated with your dissertation, but really any scholarly work that you're doing. If you're publishing articles, if you're making presentations, you can bring it to us. Tomorrow we're going to be next door at Butler in the Digital Humanities Center at 3:30 p.m. and we're having what we call an Academic Commons deposit party. So if you bring your content on a flash drive or if it's available on the web, you can come and we'll help you deposit it in Academic Commons. So that's tomorrow. And then I also want to point out that this is just the beginning. In the spring, Kenny and I will be doing a series of workshops to do more hands-on work so that as you're writing and you come across issues around copyright and licensing, you can bring them to us and we'll help you work through them. And this is my contact information. If you have any questions after the talk and you don't want to have them in front of the whole group, you can always email me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks to the Dean. Thank you to the organizers. Thanks to all of you. And by the way, congratulations. I think that's in order because I think many of you are at the point where the completion of the dissertation is in sight. And we certainly know that feeling, don't we? So it's a feeling that never leaves you. So you'll look forward to the day you file. And one of the things we want to make sure happens, and why we're here, is to make sure that that filing goes easily and doesn't stir last-minute concerns, and that you meet your deadline. So picking up where Rob left off, I want to talk a little bit about the copyright implications of your dissertation. And so we should ask simple questions up front, like, why are we paying attention to copyright? And there are really different ways of answering that question. One is with a little bit of a legal spin, and that is that we can't avoid it. it's everywhere. This is a problem of the nature of the way copyright law is structured. So, for example, up on the screen, a list of a few different types of works as examples of things that are protected by copyright. Books and periodicals, literary works, words of all different types of works, music, video, websites, software, and your dissertation, protected by copyright. Let me digress as briefly as I can into just one basic legal concept, and that is that copyright vests automatically, instantly and automatically, upon creation of these works. So you sit down and write your dissertation. As soon as you write a sentence, a paragraph, not to mention the entire dissertation, where that piece is your original work and it's fixed in some tangible medium. It is written on paper, it is saved to the memory of your computer, either way, it now qualifies for instant automatic copyright protection. So are you a copyright owner? The answer is yes. Have you even begun writing your dissertation? If you've gotten this far into it, you're probably a copyright owner. It's the way the law works, which means, in turn, that the materials that we are finding and using are also, it's safe to presume, almost always protectable by copyright. So let me ask the same question and answer it in a different way. Why are we paying attention to copyright? And let me give you this approach to the question, because it's integral to your scholarship and the success of your scholarship. That the better decisions you make about copyright, the more you're going to affect the quality of your work, the accessibility of your work, and the impact of your work on the world of researchers and scholars around you. The better you pay attention and address copyright decision making, the more you have positioned yourself to take advantage of any work that you produce and its relationship for building upon the next round of work that you are doing. The dissertation that becomes a book, the dissertation that becomes research articles, the research articles that become successor research articles, the book that you're writing that you want to build an accompanying website to go with. These all raise the importance of considering and making good, well-informed decisions about the management of your copyrights in order to position yourself to do those good things that we just described. So let me now look at sort of the two coins, the two sides of the coin, if you will, of copyright. There are issues of ownership, and as I've already said, you created the work, you own the work. That's the basic assumption of the way the law works. And then we'll be talking momentarily about your use of other people's works. So first, the ownership. You will have decisions about on what terms you want to claim, and very likely, especially if you go through ProQuest, choose the option to register the copyright in your work. Is that necessary to register your work? No, but it's fairly simple, it's fairly cheap, and it gives you some benefits, practical and legal. But upon recognizing that you are the owner, that means you have the right to make some choices about your work, to post it, to not post it, to make it available, to not make it available, to choose whether you're going to say, I own the rights, come see me, or to release it with a Creative Commons license that openly permits others to use it, albeit under limited circumstances. And then the decision to make it publicly available through ProQuest or publicly available through Academic Commons. And then because it's your dissertation, in the future, somebody may contact you and say, I would like permission to use it in this way or that way. And that becomes your decision for how you want to allow that to happen. And I think as a very important subpoint related to that, it's your decision about how you are going to build publications from your dissertation. And here too, you want to think about the terms on which you will sign agreements with journal publishers, book publishers, to advance your career with new works that are based on your dissertation research. But a lot of what we want to talk about today is the question of the materials that you use in the dissertation. I'll be giving some examples, but think of it in these terms, that you write your dissertation, the pieces of it that are clearly yours, that you wrote, that you created, those are yours. We've already talked about that. But to the extent that you are using somebody else's work, and maybe more specifically, I should say, to the extent that you are including in your dissertation somebody else's work, from the most ordinary quotation to the extraordinary use of large numbers of photos or software or music or other pieces, then we need to consider the copyright implications of the use of somebody else's work. And so generally, our ability to use somebody else's work from a copyright perspective means the use fits into one of these categories up on the screen right now. That you've determined that the work is in the public domain. And public domain in my context means it is without legal copyright protection. And there are two huge categories of public domain works that arise often. One is works for which the copyright has expired. Now, copyrights last a long time. There's a lot of complicated rules, and we're generally talking about early 20th century and before. Somebody in the room is writing on Chaucer. Chaucer predates the early 20th century. Last I checked, he isn't still around, is he? No. So a lot of those works are in the public domain. If you're writing about World War I, you're in the realm of working with things that are in the public domain. If you're writing about World War II, now you're in the realm of things that are likely protected by copyright. But a lot of stuff is public domain. Another broad category of public domain works produced by the United States government. Not the county government, not the state government, the United States government. So that report from the State Department, that report from the National Park Service, those are good works that very often are deemed to be in the public domain. So another big category, and one that could be an subject of an extensive discussion, we'll see how we get to it, is fair use and the appropriate fair use of works. Another important category is permissions. We contacted the copyright owner, requested permission, got the permission we need, we included it. Or Creative Commons. I mentioned Creative Commons a few minutes ago in terms of making the work, your work, available. You're choosing to put a Creative Commons license on the work. But you know, a lot of other people have chosen to put Creative Commons licenses on their works. And when you find that, if the Creative Commons license is broad enough, then follow the rules, typically give attribution, non-commercial use, that kind of thing, then you're okay. Or other pre-licensed sources, and there are many of them out there. And by the way, those of you looking for photographs, for example, to include in your dissertation, there are multitudes of different online resources for photographs, and many of well-known ones, such as Flickr, have Creative Commons licenses attached to them. So you go in there, you dip in, you find the photo you want, there it says Creative Commons attribution, you give your attribution in the dissertation, and you've probably done what's required to be able to properly use that work. So some examples. Think about your own dissertation. What do you have in it? So you might have maps and other kinds of graphic works. You might have music. Could be sheet music, it could be recorded music. You might have artworks, two-dimensional paintings, three-dimensional sculptural works, all of which may very well be protectable by copyright. You may have literary works as you quote from some other source. The standard quotation is the use of somebody else's work, and it may be copyright protected. So we have a number of different ways that we can include copyrighted works in our dissertation. But, reminding you about this list, your concern, and maybe concern is even overstating it, but your thinking should be with each of those works, if I have any of these in my dissertation, have I worked through thinking, is that item in the public domain? Or is my use fair use? Or do I have permission? Or did I get it from a Creative Commons or other licensed source? And so that's the approach that you'll need to take to your dissertation. So keeping it in perspective, plan ahead. Many of these tasks, honestly, do not take much time. But often the most time-consuming aspect is, if, for example, I need to secure permission, it might take a little while to get permission. I'm working on a permission request for one of my own projects right now, and I'm probably going to get that request back in a matter of hours or days once I polish it and send off and identify exactly what I'm requesting. But in other cases, it may take weeks or months, because somebody may not be there to answer, or they're slow, or they're bogged down, and you need to send a reminder and then another reminder. And so plan ahead and begin the process early. Be reasonable. Be reasonable. This is not highly complex, detailed work. Probably nobody is going to die because of the copyright issues. So be reasonable about how much pressure you're putting on yourself and how you're going to be able to advance addressing these concerns. Keep all of your options open. And by that I mean, back on that previous slide where it could be permission, it could be fair use, it could be public domain, you're going to have different answers for different types of works. This one is this, the next one is something else, the next work is something else. So keep all of your options open. Consider your alternatives, and not only legal alternatives, but consider alternatives for the works that you are using. I've had many, many instances where somebody comes to me and says, I'm running into problems clearing whatever rights I need to use this map. And very often my response is, do you really need that map, or could another one serve your purposes as well? And usually the response is, well, I don't know, I never thought of that. I saw that map, it met my needs, I didn't get past thinking about it. So do think past the particular immediate desires that you have to explore your alternatives. And as you track owners, send off letters of request, determine whether something is fair use, get it from a Creative Commons source, whatever your situation might be, keep careful notes about what you found, where you found it, when you made those phone calls, keep copies of the emails you sent to somebody, and keep all of that material. Keep all of that material really indefinitely. You never know when the question is going to come up. And then by planning ahead and planning carefully, most important point, graduate on time. Get going. If you're thinking you're going to be, for example, a May graduate of next year, you should begin this process immediately so that maybe you'll be done with it by December so you don't have to worry about it come May. And that would be an excellent thing for you to do. And then beyond that, for substance, let me refer you to the Copyright Advisory Office website, where you'll find a rich variety of materials. I hope you'll find them helpful. I welcome your feedback and comments about them, but you'll find a quick guide to walk you through in about a page and a half the principles and functioning of copyright. You'll find a variety of materials about ownership, including how to manage your work and publication agreements, a lot of material about fair use, as well as about permissions, some guidance about what's in the public domain, and some links out to those resources where you can find photographs and other images, many of which are with Creative Commons licenses. So I thank you very much, and I think we look forward to any questions you might have about anything. Thank you.
So for those whose work deals mainly with art or cultural objects where many photos may not exist that are obviously usable without having to contact someone for permission. What would maybe qualify as a fair use of that image? Is it just because it's for an academic reason? Is there a size restriction? Anything else about fair use that you might offer?
Yeah, really good question. Really good question. And I think you could ask your bottom line question. We could ask about a variety of contexts. So just in really broad terms, you found an image. Presumably somebody else owns the copyright to that image. Is it fair use for me to include it in a dissertation? What you'll find when you go to the website and begin reading about fair use is that the answer to any fair use question depends upon a reasoned, balanced application of 4 factors that are in the statute. But let me give you a concrete example. If we go back to this image, you can almost tell what's going on in the picture down here in the bottom corner. That's actually a photograph that I took from a book about the history of the Grateful Dead. Anybody writing their dissertation on the Grateful Dead? No. All right, wrong generation. And it happened that I have this book in my collection, not because I'm a deadhead, but because it was a copyright case. If you can see right here in the center of that page, that's actually a little small reproduction of one of those great rock and roll posters from the 60s and 70s, psychedelic, etc. And here came the lawsuit from the copyright owner of that poster against the publisher of the book, saying that violated my copyright and your reproduction of it. And the court ruled that that was fair use. So let me go through those 4 factors. The first factor is, what's the purpose of your use? And even though this is a commercial product, it also had the purpose of being an educational work meant to inform readers about the history of music and the Grateful Dead in particular and so on. And so that tended to be mixed purposes, but that leaned generally in favor of informing the readers, like your dissertation. The nature of the work, highly artistic, which tends to weigh against fair use, but also emblematic of the times. So it's a historical artifact. Here's a key point: amount. When the court analyzed the third factor, which is what's the amount of the work that you're using, they said, yeah, it's the whole thing, it's the whole poster, but it's small size, it's low resolution, and it's in a context of discussion and analysis rather than like a tear out of the whole thing where you could reproduce the poster in full. And then the effect on the market, yes, that poster is available for sale, but the court said using a small low-res image doesn't interfere with the market. So think about you're putting a photograph in your dissertation. You can learn from examples like this, go back to fair use, and you could say, yeah, my purpose is purely educational, academic, analytical. That weighs in favor of fair use. The nature of the work, that's going to vary from example to example, but amount. I think there's a big difference between small, low-res versus large-scale plate, high-res, full-color kind of thing. If it's also small, low-res, wrapped in text, that's going to help you a lot. And then the effect on the market depends upon, is this work being marketed? Is it being marketed specifically and realistically for your kind of use, as opposed to sales of a poster? So I think you're going to find, I've seen many of these where somebody's doing an art history thesis dissertation, and if you're telling me the page is this big, but my image is this big, and it's small, black and white, low res, wrapped in text, so it's clearly analytical, honestly, in most situations like that, I'm going to feel pretty comfortable about fair use, and I suspect you are too. If it's full color at the back where you can tear it out, then maybe I'm not going to be so comfortable. Does that help? Yeah, good.
Just wanted to ask for clarification on a couple of points that you made. In the second presentation, you said that there are a couple of decisions that we had to make, and one of the decisions was whether or not we wanted to make it available to the commons, academic commons. And my impression from the dean is that that's not an option, that's a requirement, right? So then,
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
and then a related question, assuming
Sure.
that it is a requirement,
Yeah.
then in the second presentation, you also said that we had the option that copyright was both automatic, and then we also had the option of requesting filing for official copyright, and I don't understand what the distinction is there. And then lastly, if it is required, then from the first presentation, I don't understand exactly what an embargo is and
Sure
why we
thing.
would choose that.
Okay, so I'll take questions 1 and 3 and pass 2 off to Kenny after
Perfect.
I answer those. So the first question is, what is the GSAS policy? The GSAS policy is that your dissertation will be deposited in academic commons. And so the option that is available that we call an embargo basically means there's a limited term in which we will hold your dissertation separate from the publicly accessible academic commons. So that, you elect when you file a period of 1 year or 2 years to have your dissertation not available in academic commons. And, then during that time, if you need to, consider patent or, other considerations, that allows you to do that.
Is that at our discretion, or do we have to make a case?
That's at your discretion at the time of filing. Okay. So
Okay.
off
Yeah,
to you.
good. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then on your second question was one about automatic copyright protection versus I didn't say this, but copyright notice as well as registration of the work. The way the law works is as soon as you create that new work, you get instant automatic protection. So in almost every case, it would be a very odd, unusual case that this wasn't true. I could look at every one of you and say, you're all writing a dissertation. I can tell you even before I see your dissertation and know who you are, I'm willing to bet that it is going to be protected by copyright because you just can't avoid it. It's the way the law works. But then you can gain additional legal rights by putting a copyright notice, a C in a circle, copyright by me 2011. There are some legal rights that go with that. You can gain some additional legal rights if you register the work with the U.S. Copyright Office. But do you have to do either of those? No, not at all, not at all. But they're easy, they're not expensive, they do give you some benefits if you need them. So you might as well. You just might as well. And then if nothing else, it creates the public record that here's my dissertation, I know about copyright, here's an address where you can reach me, that goes on the registration form. And that's helpful to users to be able to track you down as well. So that's a good thing.
Just to add to that, GSCS's policy towards how you format your dissertation asks you to include a copyright notice on the second page of your dissertation. And so that happens, I've been here 3 years and nobody has not put that in. So that's something that's essentially required by GSCS. So you already have that level of protection.
And does the GSAS policy permit you to add more information? So in other words, on that page 2, could I say copyright 2011 by me, and then say, I hereby grant permission to anybody to make copies of this?
Yes.
Could I do that?
We do allow that, and we've allowed students to specifically place a Creative Commons license.
That was going to be the next question. So yeah.
So yeah, there have been a few students who have taken advantage of that.
Yeah. Creative Commons is a way of saying, I own the copyright, but I hereby permit the world to use it in this manner.
As an art historian with a potentially very large PDF file dissertation with lots of images, I have a couple of questions. First off, is there a maximum limit to file size to posting to the academic commons? And second off, is it possible to submit lower resolution, maybe black and white images, less reproducible to the academic commons to obtain fair use for some of these images, but then reserve higher resolution, full color version for more limited distribution?
Sure. So I'll take your
I was
question.
actually going to ask a related question.
Yep.
In ProQuest, you used to be able to say, not this image, not that image, not that image, probably because you didn't have rights to it. Is there any way of doing kind of an on or off, which is related to the high, low resolution question?
So whichever version you submit to ProQuest is the version that comes through to Academic Commons. So whatever they've done with the file will be, that they make available, will be the file that we end up receiving. But I would, taking your questions backwards then, say that, you know, it's entirely possible to have the dissertation that's reviewed by your committee and then have the version that's submitted. And they shouldn't, you know, if there are those unresolved licensing or permissions issues, that's one way to address that, is to...
I thought that Academic Commons was, the choice was between ProQuest and Academic Commons. I didn't realize it was the same, because I mean, I'm familiar with ProQuest and their
Sure.
policies, so that answers my question.
Okay. But in terms of the file size, you know, I think the largest dissertation we have is probably over a gigabyte. So, you know, and up to 2 gigabytes, we can handle it, you know, relatively straightforward. If it happened to clear 2 gigabytes, you know, we can talk and we can probably figure it out. But, you know, we've handled, you know, files up to 1.5 gigabytes.
And you know, I'll just say too, I like the way you thought through your alternatives. I mean, if it's okay with you and if it's okay with your committee, I see it as a very okay thing for you to do, to say, in the dissertation form, my images may not be perfect, they'll look like this, and that gets the job done, and it avoids all kinds of other headaches. And then I'll just save the worrying about permissions and fees and clearances for when I land a publication contract with a journal, with a book publisher, whatever, and we'll work it out with the publisher then on the more time-consuming and maybe more expensive processes.
I mean, another thing I would add is, because you're submitting as a PDF, you know, you can also have the URLs to resources that if they're on the web but you haven't cleared the permissions, you can still provide access through your dissertation that you're submitting.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question relating to the point you just brought up. This morning I just signed away the copyright privileges to get one of my chapters published in a journal. So I'm going to use that chapter as I'm going to use that paper that as part of a chapter in my dissertation. And I imagine about half my dissertation will probably, I won't have the copyrights for, but maybe, because I'm in the sciences, so as the papers come out, you just kind of send them off to the journals. So how does that work with some of the chapters, like maybe half your dissertation?
So, I mean, it
If you don't
depends
have-
partially on the publishers, because they all have different policies. But I mean, as a baseline, you know, the thing is that when you're submitting, you are averring that you've cleared the permissions for your work to be available. And that's not just for Academic Commons, that's also ProQuest's requirement, that when you submit to them, that you be, you know, submitting something to them that they can make available. But so with the scientific publishers, in many cases, their policies, basically what they're saying is, yeah, they take over the copyright, but they let you, you know, give you back a certain range of license you back a certain number of rights, among which generally is the ability to make, well, I mean, the fact is the chapter is not going to be the article, right? It's not going to be formatted. It's not going to be, just the PDF direct from their website.
I think it will be. That's the plan.
Well, okay. Well, then, if depending on their policy, that may be okay. That may not be okay. You may need to use the version you submitted to them rather than the version after it was reviewed, or you maybe need to use the version that was reviewed but not the final version that got published. So there's a resource called Sherpa Romeo, and if you want, you can get in touch with us. We can help you use that or point you to that. But that allows you to check the policies of different journals and different publishers about the reuse of material where you've signed over the copyright.
And my first question for you is this already gone out in the mail?
It's all electronic. So.
It's all electronic, yeah. That's even
so
worse.
It's in.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that if you wanted to keep the copyrights, you had to pay a very large fee.
Oh yeah, don't do that.
Which.
Yeah, don't do that.
Right, that's what my advisor said. So.
It's a subject of another discussion, which we've covered well, and you can find videos up in the Cedar Space on YouTube and so on, where we've talked about some of these issues before. But it is immediately, obviously, your case makes the point that this is immediately important in the writing of the dissertation. But carry this lesson over throughout your career. As you're signing that publication agreement, ask yourself a very practical question. What do I want to do with this content in the future? And make a list. It's not legal stuff. This is just practical. I want to include it in my dissertation. I want to hand out copies to my students. I want to write new research that builds on this and maybe borrows some paragraphs. I want to write a book, and this could become a chapter in a book. Make a list of what you want as a practical matter and ask for those things from your publisher. So staple an addendum to the agreement that says, this is an addendum to our agreement, I reserve the right to do A, B, and C, whatever they'll let you have. And this is true, this will be true for your entire career. Be very watchful of the documents you sign, and then if nothing else, guess what I'm going to say next? Keep a copy. Did you keep a copy of the document you shipped off to them?
Oh, it's all electronic.
Did
so I have a
you hit the
copy
print
of it.
key? Did you hit the print key? Did you save it?
I saved in my inbox.
Yeah, okay, good.
But
Save it and save it forever. Copyrights last for the life of the author, so however long you live, plus 70 more years. We need that document for at least that many years in order to know the pedigree of this copyright. So hang on to those documents forever. You get a permanent file of your publication agreements.
So, I mean, I know this is commonly done in the sciences where someone will submit a chapter, a paper will get published and that'll be part of their dissertation. So I could still have my dissertation available in
Academic Commons?
Right,
Yes.
in the Commons, even though.
I mean, and the reality is, the lawyer in me can't say you're home free because you're not. But the reality is nobody's going to give you a hard time about this, except one party, ProQuest. ProQuest will do a cursory review of your dissertation, and if they see those PDF pages, they're going to contact you and say, can we see your permission letter for what you have
I don't think
here?"
that'll be a problem
Yeah,
getting that.
yeah.
So-
And that may be where you are,
As long as you have it, you're fine.
as long as.
As long as you have the permission letters from the journals.
Yeah,
to
if you
post.
have the permission letter,
Absolutely.
then you're in great shape. You're in
Okay.
great shape. And that could be a simple email. It doesn't take much magic. It really
No.
doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and reprinting of that nature is fairly common.
It
so
is.
it's
It is.
yeah, but you do need to go
Yeah.
through that step
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
asking for it.
Yeah, my point is, I think you're fine. It's just watch for these things in your routine practice in the future.
Right. Thanks.
Good.
Copyright is not an all or nothing thing. So what Kenny's saying is, you don't have to give away those things.
That's right.
You don't, just because they're asking you to sign, that's not, you have to sign
like about
They
zero.
still want the work, and they'll be willing to concede whatever. So you can ask for permission to publish this in your dissertation ahead of time, and then you don't have to go back to get permission afterwards.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Even though it's electronic, you can still send them the data.
There's also on the Copyright Advisory Office website a link to an addendum generator online. So you can put in your information and it just auto creates a PDF with a sample addendum you can send to a publisher. So you don't have to worry about, copy pasting legalese that you don't understand to begin with into another document.
Thank you.
Okay, the embargo at the academic commons, would that allow me to sort out copyright issues, or would I have to be done with all of them when I actually file the dissertation?
I would say that it's better to sort them out before you submit. And for the reason that it's not just academic commons, it's also ProQuest. And so you can get embargoes with both. But, the fact is if you submit a particular version and then we're just waiting that 1 year or 2 years, at which point we'll make it available, the version that we got. And so if you, in that time, weren't able to clear up all the copyright issues, that would leave us in a gray area where you would have submitted your dissertation, right, the version of record, and then that version can't be made available because there's a copyright problem. So I would say before you submit, resolve what you can, and if you need to redact things or have low resolution images or however you manage that, submit that version.
If I could just add, from GSAS's point of view, with your dissertation as a requirement for the PhD degree, it's important to us that the copy of the dissertation that you deposit is the final version of the dissertation, because once you deposit that, we give you your degree. And so if you wait until after that point to resolve copyright issues, and it turns out that for whatever reason you need to change the content of your dissertation, that's a problem, because now there's a new version of your dissertation after we've already granted you the degree. So from an academic point of view, as far as academic policy at GSAS, it's important that your dissertation is in the final state when you deposit it.
I've used dissertations that have actually not used their graphics with them, photographs and other illustrations. And that's one way of getting around this, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is if you actually go through, I've gone through the trouble of getting study prints and material that wasn't available and the other way from do I, by purchasing that stuff, do I now have the right to use it? Or, they're from big places like Edinburgh National Portrait Gallery or something like that. Does that give me the right of fair use?
If I'm understanding, does the fact these are images that you purchased from a supplier, a
Like
gallery, a museum, and the answer to the question, I've studied a lot of these museum licenses and practices, and they very often are selling an image from a museum that comes with a long list of conditions. Very often it's dense packed detail of these are the terms on which you may now use this image. Read it very carefully. Make sure it covers what you want. And because it's conceivable that they will even say you cannot do this, this, and this, and that's exactly what you wanted. So read those very carefully. Make sure before you spend money acquiring those images that in fact it's going to come with the permission that you need, because if it doesn't, then you're back, at best, you're back to considering fair use, which may mean you spent a lot of money to get a high resolution image and now you're only going to use it as a small low-res version, which you might as well scan out of a textbook if that's the case. So,
That's a problem because the friendly people at the archives where I visited actually didn't give me any money mail. Emailed it to me. There is no literature about what I can or can't do, so I need to contact them.
you're kind of, not necessarily. I mean, these are archival materials. Yeah, and I'm trying my best to sort of repeat the question into the answer for capturing it on tape. But you're kind of back at the beginning, which is an okay place to be, really, where you have that list of alternatives. I mean, if this is an image of an archival manuscript from 1725, well, then odds are overwhelming this is a public domain work anyway. You don't need anybody's permission. And so you may just go ahead and quote from it, maybe even reprint the manuscript into your work. You have to size up the situation one at a time.
Because I'm using the whole book, and they took photographs of the lithograph.
And the book is from what year?
1875.
1875. Odds are overwhelming that that work is in the public domain. Published book?
Yes.
Yeah, published in the United States, maybe even. It gets a little iffy, but odds are small that there's going to change anything. If you go to the, what is the public domain and duration of copyright material, there's a basic rule. You remember my World War I, World War II anecdote? That if it's published before 1923, published in the United States, and foreign publications are mostly the same, if it's published before 1923, it's public domain. Maybe your only concern is, does the archive think that it has some rights somehow in this image? But that doesn't affect the text. The text itself is public domain. So if you're just quoting, quote to your heart's content.
Can I use an image of the text?
Probably. We'd have to look at, I'm not here to say yes or no without seeing the specifics, but probably. Yeah. Good. Any other questions? Well, we thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Best wishes to all of you.